Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, from the latest weather warnings, as we do have a rain warning issued for parts of western Scotland, as we are going to see a bit of a conveyor belt of moisture over the next few days. You can see it on the live radar at the moment starting to approach where we've got this dividing line between the high pressure to the southeast and low pressure to the northwest, with pretty stationary weather fronts, and it is going to produce a lot of rain, perhaps as much as 10 inches over some of the higher ground of western Scotland. However, later on in the week we are going to see things deteriorating significantly, as we could see our first named storm of the season. Storm Amy could perhaps be arriving. I'm about 90% sure now this system will be named, given the model is keeping its intensity for this low pressure system over the past 24 hours. We saw it in the UKV yesterday, showing winds up to 100 to 120 mile per hour. And yeah, today not quite as strong from the 3 o'clock run, but still up towards 100 plus miles per hour, well over the threshold for this system to be named. And for amber warnings, maybe even red warnings, could be issued in this case. Now, none of those warnings have been issued yet, but over the next 48 hours, I'm expecting to see quite big escalation coming. The Met Office is probably just waiting for another couple of runs just to be sure on timings, positionings and intensities. But at the moment, the models really haven't shifted too much from yesterday, so I'm pretty confident now we are going to see this big storm arriving Friday into Saturday. We'll look at that, of course, in detail on the latest UKV, and then we'll run through the longer range through the GFS, GM, ECBF and the ensembles, because although, yes, it's incredibly stormy later on this week, it isn't a pattern change. It's a bit of a blip. We are going to see conditions settling down a little bit after that. Not going to be bone dry, but more of a fluid Atlantic flow with high pressure systems building in at times, little ridges trying to move in. So but expecting to see quite varied conditions longer term. This is not a big wet and windy stormy period. It's a few days before things do return a little bit more towards average. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos much, do like and subscribe. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see the precipitation starting to move in for parts of the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and it'll really not move much over the next 2 or 3 days. We've got warnings coming into force at the moment. And for parts, it is going to produce, as I said, significant amount of rain. Now, I'm calling this around 6:45 in the evening. You can see it's not a particularly cold day today. Been fairly mild. It's not anything ridiculous. But for late September, it isn't too bad. And it's because we've got this southwesterly wind. Pretty mild air is actually moving in at the moment. Still chilly overnight, of course, with temperatures dropping away. But at the moment, by day, up towards the high teens. Again, it's going to continue to stay fairly mild in the southeast, as although this is going to produce a lot of rain in the northwest, this southwesterly wind, it is actually going to bring up a lot of milder mid-Atlantic air for those southeastern areas. Now, to look at the latest weather warnings, we've got this warning issued for Western Scotland here. Now, if we go down, we can see it's not been updated since yesterday, so we've not seen a change, and it comes into force at 5 p.m. during Wednesday. So although we're already starting to see rain pushing in, the most severe stuff isn't expected to arrive until Wednesday, all the way through Thursday into Friday morning. So you can see persistent heavy rain may lead to travel disruption and flooding. Again, we won't run through the details too much. It hasn't changed since yesterday, but you see kind of the headline figure there, 200 to 250 millimeters potentially over some of the mountains. And of course, you're thinking, well, that's over the mountains. That's not going to impact many population areas. But the issue is all of that rain is going to filter down into the valleys. The river levels are going to rise, and that's where we could see issues in the subsequent hours and days, and that could be on top of the really severe system that could arrive Friday into Saturday. Now, if you look at that system, we can see the conveyor belt of moisture starting to arrive over the next few hours, really ramping up during Wednesday. And it is like a really horrible system there during Wednesday. It dies down a little bit during the afternoon. Then we see a resurgence during Wednesday night into Thursday, and you can see it turns really heavy there with some bright reds and oranges as we head into Thursday. Really not looking great at all. As we move later on through Thursday, that weather front does clear further eastwards, and we could see some heavier rain in the south and the east for a time as this first system moves through. But it's this next system during Friday into Saturday with this huge weather front pushing in. And then it's on the southern flank of the centre of this low. See this little hook here on the southern edge of the low. That is where we are going to see some insanely strong winds. As I said, widely 80, 90 miles per hour. Gusts there, maybe up to 100, 110 possible as this does move through, and it eventually clears into Sunday morning, but it's a pretty slow moving storm this. Perhaps it is going to linger for a good 12 to maybe 24 hours. Those really strong winds, 60, 70 plus. As I said, I think there's a high chance now, a very high chance, that this is going to become Storm Amy. Now, if you look at the mean sea level pressure, we got it down to around 930 or low 930s yesterday. We are seeing similar numbers today. Now, the first low pressure system that produces heavy rain there during Thursday moves through 988, nothing too extreme, and then the next low arrives, potentially Storm Amy, and you can see the center of this system getting down to somewhere in the 940s, maybe high 930s as it clears just to the north of Scotland, and it's here during Saturday early hours on the southern flank where we will see the strongest winds as it clears through, and those winds don't really die down until Sunday. Now, to look at those wind gusts, you can see as we head into Thursday, the winds will pick up in places with that initial low pressure system arriving, but nothing too bad. 50, 60, maybe a yellow warning could be issued in some spots. Then look at Friday, look at that system, 60 to 70 widely, and then on approach on its southern flank, widely looking 80, 90, up towards 100 plus miles an hour as it makes landfall. And you can see there for Saturday morning, some ridiculously strong winds, widely kind of 60 to 100 miles per hour there for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. And you can see it takes its time to clear. Those winds really do not die down until later on into Sunday morning. So we are seeing a good 24 hours there of ridiculously strong winds. So not only is it the intensity, it's the longevity of this system, not moving through in a matter of hours, but a matter of 12 to 24 hours, which could just exacerbate the impact. So we really need to keep an eye on this system. As I said, I suspect it will be named now, given the looks of the last few runs, and I do think that we will see widespread yellow, if not widespread amber, maybe even red warnings issued for this system. Now, the one other impact we're going to see from these strong west to southwesterly winds, as I said, is slightly milder temperatures. Now, you can see today it was around 18, 19 degrees for southern areas. During Wednesday, maybe even touching 20 degrees, actually pretty mild there, as we do see those southwesterly winds arriving for the first day of October. Thursday's a similar story, temperatures maybe touching 21 degrees with that strong southwesterly wind. Friday, it could be similar, but we do see the weather fronts moving through from that potential named Storm Amy, and the same could be said for Saturday, where for eventually a cold front sweeps through. You can see it's much chillier there during Saturday and most likely Sunday. So initially looking really quite mild the next kind of 3 or 4 days before it turns colder as that system does clear. Now, as you look at the latest GFS, you can see strong agreement with that storm system arriving into Friday. Again, you can see it there just over Scotland. Really severe system. And you can see the centre of that low is around the 950 millibar point. If we do look at slightly smaller intervals, yeah, around the 950, so maybe not quite as deep as the UKV. Actually gets down to 946 there, so getting close to the UKV there as it clears eastern Scotland. And again, if we look at the wind gusts, you can see widely 100 to 120 kilometres per hour. So that is looking at 70 to 80 miles per hour. Remember, this is over land. Over sea, it'll always be slightly stronger, coming up against less resistance. So a really severe system, strong agreement there from the GFS. So I am pretty confident that this system is going to be arriving at least with an intensity that is very close to what is now forecasted. Eventually, though, that system moves through and into next week, we see a brief ridge of high pressure for a couple of days. Yes, low pressure returns at times, and it could be a little bit more unsettled beyond that. But you see plenty of high pressure ridges arrive in the next couple of weeks, so it's not going to turn into an exceptionally stormy, horrific spell. Yes, it probably won't be great a lot of the time, but it's not going to be terrible. Things are still going to be decent. There are going to be some drier and milder days. Really, the storm system arriving later this week is a blip. As I said, it is 48 hours of really horrific conditions before it does clear away. Now, the GM is pretty similar. Again, low pressure systems arriving for the next few days, and then that storm system really pepping up there into Saturday morning. Again, if we do zoom in, you can see the centre of that system gets down to a similar pressure level around the 950 millibar point, maybe not quite into the 940s, but nonetheless very similar track, very similar winds, widely 70, 80, maybe 90 mile per hour gusts. And again, UKV picking up on 100 mile per hour gusts out to sea. And of course, it's high resolution, so it will pick up on some slightly higher gusts there. So yeah, strong agreement here from the GM. Again, just proving that, even more agreement from the runs today, both the track and intensity. As we progress through the following days, we start to see again some brief ridges of high pressure moving through with some low pressure at times, admittedly. So it's not going to all be milder and drier, but again, it's not this overwhelming onslaught that you kind of assume we'd see with a big storm system like this. It really, as I said, it is a one and done system. Now, if we finally finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, probably very similar. Those lows really spinning up and moving through. And again, if we do zoom in, around the 950, 960 millibar point, so very similar to the other runs. Again, 5 to 10 millibars doesn't make too much of a difference, but it still will be enough to maybe prevent those top wind speeds exceeding 9500 miles per hour, and that will make all the difference to potential damage at the surface. So hopefully, fingers crossed, the ECMWF, which is around the 950 millibar point, is the more realistic run. We'll have to wait and see. Subsequent days, though, again, similar to the other runs, high pressure does build in for a time. Low pressure does make approaches later on into mid-October, but there's a lot more high pressure around than low pressure, if we're being completely honest. Now, after you finish by looking at the latest on Soppels, quickly refresh this. You see the big temperature drop later on this week. That's as the very strong weather front clearing through. Of course, with the very big low pressure system, it's fueled by temperature contrasts, and that's exactly what we're seeing. The upper air temperature dropping from 10 degrees at 850 HPA down towards freezing, and again, that very stark temperature contrast has contributed to the intensity of this storm. Precipitation looks pretty high there, again, when that system moves through, but you can see the subsequent days it's a bit chillier, but precipitation drops, and that's as the high pressure does rebound and push back in. Sea level pressure dipping a lot as well. Remember, we're looking at London here, which is, of course, quite far from the centre of this low, so I'm not surprised that it's only down to 990. If we look at Glasgow, for example, look at that dropping down to 960, and even this looks like it's going to be quite far from the centre of the low, which just is across northern Scotland, or just actually clears to the north of Scotland. So very strong agreement that this system is going to move through. Wind speeds really picking up around the 10 to 20 meters per second mark. Again, stronger than it's going to be in London, where it's more around the 10 to 12 meters per second. But regardless, wherever you are, it's going to be very windy there on Friday and Saturday. Finally, if we look at the latest ECMWF, it's very, very similar. Big temperature drop later on this week. Precipitation really spiking before precipitation is moderate to low, and temperatures are hovering back close to average. So I have to see exactly how the longer term plays out, but in the shorter term, we've got high confidence now that we are going to see a really lively system arriving on Friday. But as I said, I'm about 90% sure it's going to be named now. We are going to see a lot of warnings for potentially Storm Amy. Hopefully next day or two we do see this named and warnings get issued. Of course, it is best, as I always say, to get these warnings and to get the subsequent sort of name out there into the media in a sort of suitable time frame so people can prepare. Of course, arriving through Friday night into Saturday, we need people to kind of be aware of that on Thursday, Friday time to make necessary precautions. As I said, it's not just kind of 6 hours of very strong winds like we can see with these storm systems. It looks like it's a good 12 to 24 hours. So some people really could be pretty immobile there, considering the strength of the winds across northern Scotland. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how it does play out. Hopefully it's on the lower intensity end, but even then it's still very strong. And of course we'll pinpoint some more of those details over the coming days, and of course make you aware of any of the warnings that will likely be issued as we do progress towards this really nasty system there on Friday and Saturday. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and see you again for another video soon.